He's trying to win the news cycle. He's full of shit is the bottom line.
Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Seb Parkinson, and I'm delighted to be joined by Dan Rafael. Dan, before we get into things, Title Sports Network has just hit 10,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel. We only launched in May, so that's a great feat. So we're really happy about that. Big part of it has been you. We got 15,000 views on our show last week. I hope you saw. So really big credit to you for that. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, Seb. Those subs all have to be because of you.
No. You're the face of the brand. You and Michelle.
Well, it's pretty cool actually to start something from absolutely nothing and have it take off to a certain degree in a pretty quick manner. So it's very exciting for all of us involved.
Yeah, no, it's a really good achievement. Something I'm personally really proud of working in the back end of this, watching it grow from day to day, and watching all the nice comments, all the bad comments. Everything in between come in and yeah, it's been good. Right, let's jump into it then, Dan. It's Wednesday as we publish this, so any big information that comes out between when we record and when this goes out, we may not cover. But let's have a quick look back at the weekend. We had Ortiz Jr. versus Sergiy Boichuk. Ortiz won by majority decision. One of the judges scored it a draw, two of them in favor of Ortiz Jr. The few highlights, obviously, Ortiz going down in the first round wasn't counted. Going down in the 8th round, that was counted. Just run us through that fight, Dan. The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Well, you said in the first round he got knocked down and it wasn't counted because originally the referee Harvey Dock ruled it a slip. But because they have the ability to use replay as part of their rule book in Las Vegas, which is a good thing, and they should do it in all jurisdictions if possible, is they looked at the video and they saw clearly it was a shot that knocked him down. Now, it wasn't a hard knockdown. He wasn't badly hurt, but that is not relevant. It's that he got knocked down from a punch. So I believe it was the 5th round, they made the call that would be reversed, and I guess the scores were then updated in terms of because they had ruled it a knockdown. So yeah, he got knocked down twice. Neither one of them were big knockdowns, but knockdowns aside, this was an absolutely fantastic fight. This was as good as it gets. This was action-packed from start to finish. This was guys in there throwing a ton of punches, but also showing skills. They had big hearts. They both really went for it. They both were in great condition. And it was just everything you want to see. Two guys who were sportsmen, a lot on the line. In addition to Boichuk's WBC interim title at junior middleweight, more so was just the stature in the weight class with Turki Al-Sheikh ringside, looking to possibly do something with the winner. And they delivered as a good of a fight as you could ask for. And I guarantee you, when we're maybe back on a video come late this year talking about the fights of the year, that this will be in that conversation and very well could be the winner. So tremendous battle. All credit to Ortiz for really doing what he had to do, because he was in some trouble basically because he had been knocked down twice. So not in trouble because he was physically going to get knocked out, because you get knocked down twice, it's hard to overcome on the scorecards. And in his corner, the great trainer Robert Garcia was basically, going to the whip early, so to speak, and was telling him we need these rounds. And Virgil got his second wind, and he went out there and he won the so-called championship rounds. He swept rounds 10, 11, and 12 on all three judges' scorecards. That gave him the victory, because if you go look at the official scorecards, he was trailing after 9 rounds, I believe it was, and just a tremendous battle. And Boichuk, nothing to be ashamed of in a defeat. And by the way, like you mentioned, close fight. One judge had it 113. That's how I scored the fight. And 2 of the judges had it 114 to 112. That's as close as you can get in terms of scoring the way that fight broke down in terms of the knockdowns and everything that went along with it. Just a fantastic battle. And, someday, I don't think it's going to be next, Seb, but I think we'll have to see at some point a rematch of that fight.
Yeah, it was a really interesting fight. What I liked about the first round is they were so close. And I don't know if you get these in America, but you get these pens where it's like a frog and it's got boxing gloves on it and you press the lever and it punches. It was like watching 2 people controlling those little frogs.
Yeah. I mean, that's what these. Listen, this is the thing about that fight. It didn't take. If you knew anything about Virgil Ortiz or Boichuk, and you've seen them before, the talking point we talked about on the show going into the fight, everybody suspected or figured, hey, this is going to be a very good fight. Now, did they say fight of the year? I don't know about they were going to go that far, but I think that definitely the anticipation was this was going to be, as they say, as you would say, as you and your British friends, a proper tear-up. I mean, a good scrap. I mean, everybody knew these guys are going to be in there and making it a physical, entertaining fight for the fans. And that's exactly what happened. Virgil Ortiz and Boichuk had sparred countless rounds together when they were both trained by Manny Robles. Virgil then left Manny, went back to Robert Garcia. But they logged a ton of rounds in the gym when Virgil was getting ready for his fight against the Mean Machine, Edges Kavalauskas. Boichuk was his main sparring partner. And in the interview I did with Virgil leading up to the fight, he's like, listen, there's not going to be any boxing in this fight. This is going to be us going right at each other. We know each other well. We know our styles. And that's exactly what happened. Sometimes guys talk like that and they don't deliver. These guys talk like that and they actually delivered.
Well, what I've written down in my notes, just for reference, what you just said there, round 8 really opened up, became a slug match after the knockdown. Very fun to watch. So that references what you said about it being a tear-up.
And it wasn't just round 8. It was pretty much everything leading up to it. I mean, it was just that kind of fight. And the thing I liked about it also, they weren't just in there slugging. I mean, yes, that was part of it, but they had some skills. Like they actually were able to, take a subtle move here or there and try to get the advantage, counter punch, things along those lines that made it both action-packed, but you could see that they were doing these things with a reason, with some purpose. They weren't just in there winging wild punches for no reason. Now, there was a little bit of that also, which makes it fun on top of that. But look, and the other thing that was interesting about the fight is that going into the match, Virgil had won all of his fights by knockout, had never been past full 9 rounds, maybe even 8 rounds. And there was a lot of questions like, how's he going to react when he's in with a guy that can hang with him punch for punch? And that's going to force him to go further into a fight and show a little bit more heart, because he was getting rid of his guys so easy. Even the fights that went a little bit later, he was, pretty much dominant. But he got pushed and he passed that test. He like I said, he had a little bit of a lapse there where he seemed like he got a little tired, but he responded well to what was going on in the corner. And he went out there and he amped it up. He really found another gear and showed, the heart that you need if you're going to fight on a championship level. That he answered a lot of questions by going the 12 rounds, by taking some shots, by getting through the rough points, by not letting the knockdowns get to him in terms of either physically or mentally. Just a really good fight from him, and you can't do anything but tip your hat to Boichuk, who showed a lot of heart, and on a lot of people's scorecards he should have been the winner.
Yeah, there was a point in round 12 where Ortiz Jr. took a real big shot that shook him. It wobbled him. Do you think that his experience kept him in that, or do you think that was something that he wasn't really expecting, considering the previous fights he's won by knockout, not gone beyond 9 rounds?
Well, I mean, listen, when you have sparred with the guy a lot of times, you know what kind of power he's got. When you get the kind of sparring and the kind of work in the gym with Robert Garcia, with the great group of guys he has in his gym, you're going to get tested in sparring. So I don't think this was anything that was something that he had never dealt with before. Maybe not in front of the bright TV cameras in front of everybody watching, but these guys have been around a while. This is he's no rookie is the point. He's been in with some good fighters, been in with former world champions, and he's paid his dues in the pros so far. And when he got on the highest level he's been at, he performed and he passed, and it was a tremendous fight. And he's going to move on to bigger and better things.
Yeah, as you said, a fight of the year contender there, and we've had a few fight of the year contenders this year. To be fair, so that's definitely up there. I just want to move on. So I want to go back to go forward, really. So during the fight week, I think it was at the weigh-in, we saw that Virgil Ortiz's father was shouting across the arena, saying all sorts of obscenities, and it really built the fight up to be a bit bigger than. It was already a decent fight, but it made it a little bit bigger than it was. A bit more a bit more on the line, a bit more personality, a bit more of a needle mover, shall we say? But Tom Loeffler, who spoke to Aaliyah, our Aaliyah, he gave us some really good quotes in the build up to the fight. But post fight, he was obviously said that he still thinks that Boichuk's the champion. I know he's just backing his man. But then on Twitter, and you've retweeted the response to this, he's I'm going to read the quote out for the listeners. It says, Sergiy arrived. It's a video, by the way. It says, Sergiy arriving at his after-fight party like the champion that he is. Face looking clean as he rolled with many punches. Virgil looking rough after 12 grueling rounds, getting hit with clean punches to the head. Credit to both fighters for putting on a fight. A great fight for the fans. We agree with the overwhelming majority of media and fans that thought Sergiy should still have his title, especially with the 2 knockdowns. Credit to Virgil and Robert Garcia for fighting a great fight, and Cutman Mike Rodriguez keeping Virgil in the fight with the busted nose and swollen eyes. Virgil was still at the hospital for observation after they released Sergiy to enjoy his after party. And Robert Garcia responded, yeah, the same media that's there at his after party. Just a coincidence, I'm sure, Tom. Either way, great fight, but fights aren't scored by how your face looks after the fight. I'm sure you thought Triple G won all those Canelo fights, but his face would say otherwise if this is true. And you've retweeted that. So just what's going on here, Dan? What's the beef? What's the situation?
Listen, that's politics, man. That's trying to, that's, you ever watch like here in the United States, they have, the politicians have debates when they're in their campaigns, a presidential debate, a vice presidential debate. When it's over, they and their surrogates go into the spin room and you try to spin the situation. You talk to the media members and you try to get your point of view across and try to win the news cycle. That's all Loeffler is doing. He's trying to win the news cycle. He's full of shit is the bottom line. I mean, here's the reality. And he knows this, and it actually irritates me because Tom is a good promoter and he's a knowledgeable boxing person. I have known Tom Loeffler for probably 25 years, and he knows damn well. And that point that Robert made about how your face looks, if you just looked at a guy's face, there's no way that Canelo Alvarez lost his fights, either the first 2 fights against Gennady Golovkin, because it was Golovkin whose face was all marked up. But the reality was, after that first fight, his face may have been marked up, but most everybody thought that Golovkin was the rightful winner, even though the judges ended up scoring that a draw. But here's the point, though. In the fight between Boichuk and Virgil Ortiz, the reality was, yeah, Virgil got dropped 2 times, but it's math. You have to add up the scores. You're scoring 12 individual fights, essentially, 12 individual fights, 3 minutes apiece. And then you score each one round by round, and you add up the math. How a guy's face looks at the end of the fight is absolutely irrelevant. Now, the punches that landed caused the marks may have won him a round here or there because of the damage he did in those individual rounds with those punches. But it doesn't mean anything. Tom Loeffler knows that. You add up the scores after each round. How a guy's face looks has nothing to do with the result of the fight if you go to the scorecards. So the reality is also, I'll say this, he says the majority of the media and or the fans had Sergiy winning the fight. I don't agree with that. I saw tons of people posting on their social medias, read articles from other journalists that reported on the fight. Plenty of people had this fight a draw. Plenty of people had this fight in favor of Virgil Ortiz. And yeah, of course, plenty of people thought that Boichuk won also. But when you're dealing with a fight where one judge has it even and 2 other judges have it by 2 points in a fight that had that kind of action where there were some close rounds, that ain't a robbery. That's a close fight. And I get sick and tired of every single week having some manufactured controversy. Scoring 2 knockdowns in a 12-round fight is definitely a benefit and an advantage. But it doesn't win you the fight. And I'll give you another example that Tom Loeffler should go check his memory bank on, because Tom Loeffler spent a long, long time closely associated doing business with the Klitschko brothers. And I was ringside on the night that Vladimir Klitschko fought in Atlantic City against Samuel Peter in their first fight, an IBF heavyweight title eliminator. And it was Samuel Peter who scored 3 knockdowns against Vladimir Klitschko. And guess what? Vladimir Klitschko won the decision. Why? Because when you do the fucking math, he won every single other round of the fight other than the rounds in which he got knocked down. So once again, it's mathematics, and Tom Loeffler knows that.
Well, there you go. That's that question answered. So, Dan, what next then for Virgil Ortiz? A lot of talk is he's going to face Terence Crawford. We've already discussed that Turki Al-Sheikh was ringside. Is there any scope in that? Is there anything that's come out, or is that just pure coincidence? No,
I think that's a realistic possibility. Here's the thing. He had been in Los Angeles, Turki Al-Sheikh, for the card that he and his team put on with Crawford and Madrimov, and he stayed in the United States, and it's a very short trip from LA to Vegas, where he met at some point while he was there with Oscar De La Hoya, who was a promoter of Virgil Ortiz and was putting on the card on Saturday night. And remember all the stuff that went on in the previous days where Turki Al-Sheikh and Canelo Alvarez had their little back and forth, and Canelo basically said, I don't want to talk about a fight with you while I'm getting ready for Edgar Berlanga, and I don't like how you talk to me, and we're going to do it my way, and the things that Canelo said, and Turki gave it right back and said, you know what, I changed my mind. I don't want to do Canelo Alvarez against Terence Crawford anymore, and that he wanted to look to do Terence Crawford against Virgil Ortiz. Now Virgil had to come through the fight and win. And I'm sure that one of the reasons that Turki was there to watch the fight, to assess and give his opinion and see if that's a fight that he wants to do. And with Virgil having come through the fight with a close victory in a very exciting fight, And keep in mind, it was Terence Crawford who came through with a very close victory in a less exciting fight against Majimov. Now the stage would be set potentially for in a fight that each of them would have next to do Virgil against Terence Crawford. Oscar said that's a fight that would interest him. Was Virgil Ortiz speaking in his post-fight commentary. That's a fight he would absolutely love to have. It's a great opportunity, number one, to win a full title, also to get a big payday, also to face off against a fighter that many people have as number one pound for pound. So I do think that's a legit possibility. And in terms of like what Boichuk would do, I think the great card could be, and certainly Turkey and his team, they've got the money to do it. You know, you do the big fight, you do Terence Crawford against Virgil in the main event. And you know what? You take the hard luck losers, Boichuk and Majimov, who are both, proved themselves to be top junior middleweights also. You match them up in the co-feature. I mean, that's a tremendous card. And then, you play it out from there. And one of the things that the Saudis have sort of excelled at in the brief time they've been doing these cards is they've taken a guy that maybe has been a game loser, let's say, and brought him back and put him on another show to get another big opportunity. They did it, say, for example, with Gerald Miller. He gets stopped in his fight. He comes back and he has the fight with Andy Ruiz on the card last week. They've done that with other fighters as well, where, a loss is not a death knell. And so that seems to me, if they do a Ortiz against Crawford, they're not going to just throw away Majimov or Boichuk. That would be a fantastic fight between the two of them, in my mind.
Yeah, I don't disagree, and maybe a winner stays on scenario where the winners of each fight each other, whether that's a rematch or a new fight. I'm going to use the Las Vegas link, Dan, to move on to the other fight of the weekend over in Albuquerque, featuring hometown hero Angelo Leo, who resides in Las Vegas. There's my link. He put Luis Alberto Lopez away in devastating fashion. I won't spoil it though, Dan. Talk us through the fight and what the win does for Angelo Leo's status.
This was a really good fight. I mean, it was actually a Saturday night where you had that the Virgil Ortiz and Sergiy Boichuk fight. That was the first fight that took place. Then when that fight ended the way it did, I then switched over to watch the other fight, which was about 5 or so rounds in. So I had to go back and watch the earlier parts later on. But you were able to see the conclusion, the last few rounds, the last 5 rounds of the fight. A tremendous fight, highly competitive. Going into the knockout round, you had a fight where it's on the table. You got basically even up kind of fight. One guy was up very, very slightly. The other was a split decision going to that 10th round. And, it was anybody's fight. Now, keep in mind, Angelo Leo, yeah, he was the hometown guy, but he hadn't fought in Albuquerque in like quite a number of years. You have to go all the way back to when he was basically a 6-round prospect coming up. So he's from there, and it's his hometown, of course, but he's been living in Vegas and fighting in all different places. But it was a big deal for him to be home in a title fight. You had Lopez, who's been an excellent champion, who's been a road warrior, once again willing and able to fight in the opponent's hometown. Remember, when he won the elimination fight to get the title shot in the first place, he went to London and he knocked out the Brit Isaac Lowe. When he won the world title, he went to Leeds, England, and he scored a very close decision majority against Josh Warrington in his hometown. Then they did him no favors in his first title defense. They shipped him back to Belfast, Northern Ireland, to take on Michael Conlon, who he scored a spectacular knockout against. Then he had a couple of neutral territory fights in the United States, and now they went to Albuquerque for this fight with Angelo Leo. So he liked and enjoyed and sort of embraced being the road warrior, being sort of the villain of the fight. But in that 10th round of what was a very close fight, Angelo Leo, who I've always viewed as a good boxer but never really thought a whole lot about the punching power, they had been in a clinch and the referee broke them apart. And when the fight resumed, there was no waste of time. Immediately, the first shot that Leo threw was a massive, beautiful, perfect pinpoint flush left hook on the chin, double impact. He went down, hit his head, and it was over and out. I mean, a spectacular knockout. I mean, what better way, if you're Angelo Leo, to score your biggest victory of your career, to do it in a knockout of the year kind of fashion in front of your hometown and become a world champion by doing so. He had won a world title in the junior featherweight division, but he only held that belt for about 6 months. He won it against Tremaine Williams, which was a late replacement fight. Not a lot of spice to that matchup. It was a very easy win for him against an opponent that was not on his level. And then he lost it 6 months later to Stephen Fulton, who was the original opponent who had dropped out because he had COVID. This is a much bigger win for him. To do it against a guy that I think most people had viewed, at least over the last, say year or so, as the number one fighter in the featherweight division, and to do it in this spectacular fashion. So he's on top of the world. And it was a devastating loss for Lopez because those are hard type of knockouts to recover. I kept thinking about other guys we've seen just drilled like that. I just thought of in his locker room after the fight was Oscar Valdez kind of consoling him. I guess they're friendly with each other. And it made me think of when Oscar Valdez won his title at 130 pounds, he did it in a similarly devastating fashion by knocking out Miguel Burchelt, who's really never quite been the same since then. You hope that Lopez can recover and come back strong. But that was a rough knockout. And for Angelo Leo, look, he wins the title, and now he's going to have a big opportunity at some point against somebody else.
No, it was a beautiful, beautiful shot. And do you know what I thought was a bit, I don't know whether unnecessary is the right word, but the referee was counting him. And I'm looking at him, and I'm thinking, he ain't getting up. Just wave it and get the medics in. He's like counting him as he's in the ring. Like, what's that all about?
I get that, and that's sort of one of the same things that my good pal Joe Tessitore, who was the broadcaster for ESPN, made the same comment. And everybody's entitled to their opinion. I respect what you just said, and I respect what Joe said about that. I slightly disagree because he was not out cold. Obviously, if you're out cold, you stop the fight. But he got knocked down. It was a hard knockdown, but he was trying to get up. He was moving. He had tried to sit up. He was starting to kind of turn over onto his all fours at the time that the ref reached the 10 count. So I didn't really have a problem with counting. I mean, it wasn't like, I didn't feel like, anyway, I'm not a doctor or whatever, but it didn't seem, I've watched a bazillion knockouts in my day. I didn't feel like he's in some kind of massive medical trauma where he needs immediate medical assistance. It was a great knockout, but it was a regular knockout, if you will. And the ref gave him the benefit of being a champion, having a couple of seconds still on the count to see if he could get up. He did, and he counted him out. And then they got the commission and the doctors and stuff there to take care of business. So, waive it, not waive it. I mean, yeah, could he have? Yeah, I guess, and no one's going to complain. But I don't have a problem in that particular instance of them giving a couple of extra seconds. I mean, this was less of a devastating knockdown, in my opinion, than let's take, for example, a very famous one where the referee also counted and let the guy see if he gave it up. And that was when Tyson Fury got off the mat in round 12 in his first fight against Deontay Wilder. A lot of referees would have immediately stopped that fight. So I'm all for, if you don't feel like the fighter is in immediate medical danger, to let him take the extra literally like 3 or 4 seconds to see if he can get up, and assess him at that point. I'm okay with that.
And that's fair enough. I feel like I agree with you now. So he won the IBF featherweight title. So before we move on to part 2, Dan, what's next for Angelo Leo?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, at this moment, it's obviously open-ended, but I know going into the match, you had Lopez talking about how he would love to have a unification fight. He was looking at the possibility of taking on the winner of a fight that will take place later this year. That's the rematch between Rafael Espinoza and Robeisy Ramirez. Remember, at the end of last year, it was Espinoza who scored a huge upset and won the WBO title in their first fight. He's had one defense since. Robeisy has come back with one win since, and Top Rank's plans are to make the rematch for the end of this year. So he was looking forward to possibly fighting the winner of that fight. And then in the longer term, he was saying, I'd like to fight Naoya Inoue, because once Inoue goes to featherweight, he's going to want to fight for a title. And so Lopez was hoping he would be there, and they're all related to Top Rank. And now that Angelo Leo has won this title and is involved with Top Rank also, he was saying that that's what he would like. He would like a unification fight. He would like Naoya Inoue. So I think it's entirely possible that he could slide into that position and maybe get the winner of an Espinoza rematch against Robeisy Ramirez. And if he doesn't, there's other featherweights out there that can make for intriguing fights. If the Saudis come calling, I mean, they've been using, for example, Nick Ball on their shows. He's got a title. Like, I got to figure there's something out there for him that will be interesting.
Yeah, well, we'll bring part 1 to an end there, Dan. With that, we'll come back in a second to talk about part 2. We are going to reflect a little bit on the Ortiz Boichuk fight with some comments that have been made, but we'll catch up with you in part 2. Welcome back to part 2 of the podcast with myself, Seb Parkinson, and Dan Rafael. Dan, the only real news that's come out this week, at the time of recording, is that Terence Crawford has vacated his WBO welterweight title, meaning, I guess, that he's going to be campaigning now at super welterweight and maybe even higher in the future. But the intentions are there. What does all this mean for the welterweight division? What does it mean for Crawford? Has it opened the doors for all them belts being spread out a bit more? Because I think he was undisputed, wasn't he, for a period until recently?
Yeah, this is always what happens when you have undisputed champions, and especially if they're undisputed or even unified and they decide to go to the next weight class. it's sort of like dribs and drabs. The belts start to be stripped away or vacated. So, like you mentioned, he was undisputed. He became the undisputed champion in July of last year when he knocked out Errol Spence in their big, huge mega fight. And he went into that fight with one belt, and Errol Spence had the other three belts, and he became the four-belt undisputed champ. And even going into that fight, everybody sort of figured, okay, even if they do a rematch, which everybody knew that both sides had the right to for the loser, that they would probably end up doing it perhaps at a heavier weight. So the fact that the titles have started to be stripped away or vacated is not a surprise. It happened early on with the IBF. Remember, Jaron Ennis was the interim IBF champ, and Terence Crawford. It wasn't like he was ducking Ennis, in my opinion. He just had this big fight with Errol Spence, and he wasn't going to be jumping back into negotiations immediately. He was going to kind of look around at the landscape, find a bigger fight than Ennis, who is a tremendous fighter, but would not have been at that level in terms of the commercial viability. So anyway, he got stripped of the IBF belt for not going forward with the mandatory, and Ennis was elevated for the full champion. Then it was about, I don't know, maybe a month or so ago, 6 weeks ago, where you had the WBC reclassifying him right before the Madrimov fight, when that was signed, to be their champion in recess, as they say. And then shortly after that occurred, they elevated their interim champion, Mario Barrios, to the full champion. So now he's lost the IBF. He's no longer the WBC. He now still holds the super title of the WBA, where you have Amanda Stanionis as the regular title holder. I'm assuming that in the soon future that WBA title will be vacated also. And as you mentioned, it was on Monday of this week that he notified the WBO that he was going to remain in the 154-pound weight class, and they vacated the WBO championship. And now the interim champion, Brian Norman, who had won that belt back, a few weeks ago, a month or so ago, he became elevated to the full champion. So that's just the nature of the business. You get a guy that finally unifies all the titles, and where it used to be, that was the start of something. And a guy would go on and have a long title reign or defend it as many times as he could. Now it's almost like the ending point. When you become undisputed, it's very rare that a champion will stay undisputed for more than a fight or two. Canelo has been the exception, at least in the four belt era, where he's made a few defenses. And even with Canelo, he's now been stripped of the IBF belt for not fighting the mandatory and going forward instead with the Berlanga fight. So becoming undisputed is usually the end of the road for the titles all being unified, because it doesn't last. And Crawford is just the latest example. He's obviously going to stay, as he said, he's staying at 154. He just won a title in that weight class against Madrimov. He also won the interim WBO belt in that same bout. And he's looking for bigger fights. And as we were talking about in part one, there's a good likelihood that he'll wind up getting matched up with Virgil Ortiz if Turkey has his way. And that will be an exciting fight. And in the meantime, you got a welterweight division in transition. You got Ennis doing his thing, coming off a win not that long ago in his hometown. You got Mario Barrios, who also scored a recent victory. And you have Stanionis, who's back in action. And now we have Brian Norman going to be looking to make his first title defense. So it's new faces, new blood, and the great Terence Crawford now fighting in the heavier weight division.
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll, as we said earlier about Ortiz Crawford, hopefully we may see that in the future. But who knows with the crazy world of boxing at the moment, Dan? There's Crawford Canelo, Crawford Ortiz, Canelo Usyk probably in the future.
Well, the thing about you mentioned about Crawford and Canelo, that was something that Crawford had wanted, but Turkey has said that's off the table now because of the back and forth that the fighter and the Turkey have had. But things can always change in boxing. Nothing is forever. If Canelo comes through the Edgar Berlanga fight and now he's interested to do the match and they can somehow have a meeting of the minds, you never say never in this business.
No, never say never, especially where money's concerned with Turkey Al-Sheikh and everything else in between. Well, speaking of never say never, there's been some quotes come out over the weekend from that Ortiz fight. Donaire versus Gonzalez, Chocolatito. Just run us through them quotes, Dan, and what the situation is, because one side's saying there is a fight, one side's saying no chance.
So this has been like the old man fight of my dreams, if you want to know the truth. I'm a huge Chocolatito Gonzalez fan, as I think all boxing fans should be. Same thing for Nonito Donaire, both tremendous champions, both great guys outside the ring, credits to the sport. Both guys will be future Hall of Famers. Both guys won world titles in 4 weight divisions. They've done it all basically. And so there was, when there was a lot of like conversation or like hope, I guess, when Roman Gonzalez came back after a lengthy layoff and returned to the ring in June, and he scored a knockout in his first fight back in Nicaragua in a number of years. And he talked about that fight that he did was at bantamweight. It was 117 pounds, just one less than the weight limit. His first fight in that weight division, and he wanted to have another fight after that. He was hoping to get a championship fight of some kind, but that hadn't been determined if that was available. And then you had Donaire, who, even though he hadn't fought since last summer when he lost the WBC's bantamweight title on the undercard of the Errol Spence Terence Crawford fight to Santiago, he had said I'm not retiring. He was looking for another go. And so over the weekend, Donaire lives in Vegas. And my buddy Lance Pugmire, who writes for Boxing Scene, was at the fight and spoke to Donaire and wrote a story. And there were some quotes from him saying that the Donaire, that his side and that the Chocolatito camp were talking about the fight, negotiating a fight or trying to get the deal done. And they hoped that it would take place at the end of the year. And I was like, wow, this is going to be fantastic. If it happens, I'm totally psyched. And then just the day after, a couple days after, it was Gonzalez posting on his social media, kind of throwing cold water on that, saying, no, we're not negotiating a fight. I have no interest in that fight. You don't bring anything to the table for me, because he wants a title. Donaire doesn't have a title. And so he basically said, good luck in retirement, which, was kind of funny because Donaire has said he's not retiring. But the point is, you had the Donaire camp saying for whatever reason that they were negotiating this fight or in talks for the fight. And you got the Gonzalez side saying, what are you talking about? We're not doing the fight. So my dreams of the old man fight of my dreams is gone, apparently. I'm all bummed out about it. I would have loved to see that fight.
The Chocolatito tweet says, on behalf of Team Chocolatito, we want to inform our fans that we have no interest at all in capitals, of fighting Filipino Flash, nor are we in talks with his team. He has no title or anything that interests us. Therefore, we wish him luck in retirement. God bless.
I mean, maybe he's just trying to stir the soup up and create some interest. That's my hope, is that this is the stuff that guys talk before they actually make a deal. And I always think back when I see those types of comments, I'll date myself a little bit. I remember covering the big fight between Oscar De La Hoya and Fernando Vargas. That was a huge fight back in the day, junior middleweight world championship, big rivalry. And you had Oscar De La Hoya saying nonstop, I'm never going to fight Fernando Vargas, basically F him. I'm not giving him the payday. Always reminding me of the Mike Tyson quote, where the most disrespectful thing that a fighter can do to another fighter is not give the other guy the payday when he needs it. And De La Hoya was like, F Fernando Vargas, I'm not giving that dude the payday. I'm never fighting him. And when the money became big enough, Oscar fought him, and they put on a huge pay-per-view, and it was a tremendous fight. And Oscar scored a big knockout. So I always think about that when there's such protest from one side that I'm not doing the fight. It makes me think like maybe they ultimately will do the fight, but who knows?
No, good. Before we end then, Dan, we're going to look ahead to the weekend, but I just want to say to all the listeners, all the viewers, everybody, wherever you consume in this show, thank you very much for listening. We really appreciate everything. What we're going to do is we're going to tee up a live Q&A in the next week or two. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask you to leave a comment with a question for Dan Rafael. Anything. Ask him whatever you want. What he's had for tea, what his thoughts are on Donald Trump.
Well, I don't drink tea. Number one, I don't drink tea.
No, sorry, dinner. What you have for your tea is, maybe that's a British term. What you eat for your food, your dinner, your lunch. Anything you want to ask, Dan, get it in the comments. We're going to react to some of these questions on this show, and then we're going to be live, so you can literally leave a comment live, and we'll react to them there and then. Whatever you want to ask, let us know. Dan says nothing's off the table unless it's really, really offensive. But yeah, to end the show, Dan, then we're going to look ahead to this weekend. It's Mbilli versus Derevyanchenko. It's the only sort of decent, worthwhile mentioning fight on the of the weekend in Canada. Mbilli is highly ranked with all the organizations. Before we get into that, how do you see this one going? I'm going to assume that the answer is Mbilli is going to win by probably knockout.
Well, I don't know about him. I don't know about either one of those situations. I mean, Sergiy Derevyanchenko is tough as leather. I mean, he is a tremendous fighter in the sense he makes exciting fights. He can land a good shot. He can take a good shot. He's vastly experienced. He's fought for the world titles, I think 3 different times. He's come up short in those fights, but he's always given a great effort. He's been involved in a fight that a lot of people picked as the fight of the year last year in a very close loss to Jaime Munguia. I mean, this is a real fighter. Mbilli is still somewhat untested. He looks the part. He's got a great record. He's got a couple of okay names on his ledger. He's in phenomenal condition. He can bang. It seems like he takes a good shot, but this is a step up for him. I mean, Derevyanchenko is no joke. Now, obviously, Mbilli is favored, and he should be. He's younger. He's fresher. He's the guy that's fighting in front of his home crowd. It's his his team's promotion. All the things that go into why you're the A side or the B side. But this is a real test for him, I think. Now, Sergey's been in some rough battles, and at some point, this may be going to catch up to him. But I'm not sure it's done that quite yet. So while, yes, Mbilli probably should win the fight, to say it's definitely by a knockout or even that he's definitely going to win the fight, I don't think you can take that to the bank at all. I will tell you this, though. Everybody was saying after last weekend's fight between Vergil Ortiz and Sergiy Boichuk, mark it down, fight of the year, fight of the year. Everybody should just calm down. I get the emotion and excitement because we saw this fantastic fight, but we're only in August, and that fight between Mbilli and Sergey Derevyanchenko has a chance to be that kind of fight. And keep in mind also that for all the great matchups we have seen already, that still could also be involved in the consideration for fight of the year besides Vergil Ortiz-Bohachuk, because people will have their opinions. You got the tremendous heavyweight battle between Derek Chisora and Joe Joyce. Obviously, Ortiz-Bohachuk. We had that fantastic fight from earlier in the year in the featherweight division between Raymond Ford and Otabek Kolmatov. That was a sensational fight. We saw, obviously, the one that will get probably a lot of consideration for a lot of different reasons was the great fight we saw between Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk for the undisputed heavyweight title. We got a lot of stuff still ahead of us, so I'm not really ready and willing to write it down that Boichuk and Ortiz is the fight of the year, because I do strongly believe that Saturday's fight between Mbilli and Derevyanchenko could very well join that list of those contenders. That is a tremendous fight. Whatever you think of their the rankings and how it impacts the super middleweight division, it's just going to be a good old fashioned slugfest in my mind.
Well, that is everything that we as fans want to hear as well. A win for Mbilli then, Dan. What does that mean for his career? Is there potential for him to fight for that vacant IBF? Is there potential for him to become a mandatory for Canelo? Because he's highly ranked with all the organizations. He is.
He's ranked across the board. This will be his a main event. He's now co-promoted by Top Rank, so they're going to give him a push also along with Eye of the Tiger Promotions. He won't be fighting for the IBF title. That is that's a fight. A different fight for that has already been ordered once they stripped away the title from Canelo Alvarez. But what really it does set up is, number one, he'll score a notable win against a good name in Sergey Derevyanchenko. It's his first time. I think it's his first time being the main event on the ESPN network. He's been on ESPN Plus on some of the Eye of the Tiger cards that Top Rank has brought in, but this is the first one they're really going all out for. So he'll have presumably some more eyeballs on his event, and it should, like I said, be a good fight. He will be highly ranked still if he wins the fight. And I think what Top Rank is planning to do, and it's not a done deal. You still have to have some pieces of the puzzle play out. But they also have a super middleweight fight that Top Rank is doing coming up in a few weeks from now, where they're working now with Jaime Munguia, who had that fantastic fight and won against Derevyanchenko in the fight that many people called the fight of the year in 2023. And so if everything works out, and if Mbilli wins, and if Munguia takes care of his fight against Eric Bazinian, then there's a very strong possibility that we will see Jaime Munguia against Christian Mbilli. Now, that's not a world title fight, but that's a high-profile fight. That's a good money fight. It's a great fight for the fans. So that seems like that would probably be what's on the table. And if Derevyanchenko happens to pull the upset, there's always the prospect of possibly a rematch. But then there'd also be the possibility, if Munguia is the winner in his fight, that who wouldn't want to see Munguia against Derevyanchenko in a rematch? They fought the fight of the year to many people in 2023. So these guys will be involved in some of those types of fights, because right now the super middleweight division, it's hard to get a title shot when you got Canelo Alvarez with 3 of the belts, and even the other belt is going to be contested for the vacant title that's going to be coming up. So getting a title shot in this weight class is not easy. So you got to figure out other fights that are interesting to the public, and putting together any combination of Mbilli, Derevyanchenko, Munguia is going to fit that bill.
Well, you've heard it here, everybody. Thank you very much, Dan, for joining me. I really appreciate it. We'll be back next week, next Tuesday, hopefully. Well, back next Wednesday, so we'll record on Tuesday. Don't forget to get
those questions in. Get those questions in.
Leave them in the comment. Either reply to Dan's Twitter when he tweets this out, my Twitter, the YouTube comments. I'll check everywhere, and I'll look for some questions. But yeah, as I say, we're going to do a live Q&A at some point, so be prepared for that. We'll announce that as and when we can come up with a time and a date that suits both of us, because obviously we are 5 hours apart across the world. And yeah, we look forward to it. Thank you for joining me, Dan. Hope you've all enjoyed the show, and we'll be back next week.